Excellence and a Travel Award from the International Behavioral Neuroscience Society. In addition, he has written 15 published abstracts, 10 of them as first author. He has been invited to several symposia to give lectures. Even more impressive, he has written or co-authored over 20 peer-review original research publications, 9 of them as first author, and served as an ad hoc reviewer for many articles, including The Cerebral Cortex, Learning and Memory, Behavioral Brain Research, and Genes, Brain, and Behavior. For his ongoing research, John has won prestigious grants from the NEH, including serving as an investigator on a multi-million-dollar alcohol research center. He asked me to emphasize the significance of his mentoring activities, which he will share with you. I am proud to introduce Dr. Jonathan Brigman.
Thank you, Dr. March, and thank you to Dr. Newman and the Academy for this award. I really am honored to accept it today. I'm sure you're all just dying to hear about my research, focusing on the glutamatergic NMDA receptor and how it mediates synaptic plasticity in corticostriatal networks, but that's a different talk entirely, so just line up to the side if you have any questions later. What I really want to talk about today, not surprisingly, is the Academy. So my time at the Academy was shorter than most, I think, but it was incredibly meaningful to me. To come into a group of people that's tight-knit, had known each other for years, and how welcoming and open they were to accepting some weird kid from St. Louis who was coming in as a senior, and make him feel part of the Academy family was really important to me. The friends that I met here and their families made the Academy feel like a home, and it made Harrisburg feel like a home for a kid who had moved around a lot and had been to 3 different high schools in 3 years. Not because I was kicked out of those high schools, just moved around. The other thing that really meant a lot to me was the teachers. Dr. March, Dr. Jones, Dr. Joy. I had good teachers before in school who were good at imparting knowledge and the information you needed to pass the test. But at the Academy, I found people who were willing to go the extra mile, to take that interest in the student, to give them that push, sometimes subtle, sometimes not subtle, to do more than they expected that they could do, to get outside their comfort zone, to do that reach that's really required to achieve something special. As I left the Academy and went on to my undergraduate career, I was surrounded by professors, some of them brilliant, some of them good teachers, a handful of them both. But what I knew I needed to seek out wasn't just the person who was good at imparting knowledge in the classroom, but someone who was willing to take the time to see, hey, this kid might have something worth investing in. And how can I help him by telling him about my path and how I got where I am today? And I was fortunate enough to find those mentors at Loyola who helped a poor undergraduate in psychology who had a lot of big questions, like, what in the world do you do with an undergraduate degree in psychology? What do you do when you're passionate about the brain and behavior, but you know that you don't want to do clinical work? And what is this neuroscience term that I keep hearing? What does it have to do with psychology? What does it have to do with biology? So as I moved on into my graduate career and then into my postdoctoral fellowship, and a quick note to anybody interested in the audience in biomedical research, don't do the math on how long it takes to become a rising star if you're doing research. I was able to find these mentors who would tell you, they taught me how to be a good scientist, I hope, taught me how to do the technical experiments I needed to do, the writing, the grantsmanship that takes to be successful. But they also told me the things that aren't covered in the request for proposals, that aren't covered in the body makeup, what it takes to really succeed and run your own laboratory. So now that I have my own laboratory, and I have undergraduates, graduate students, post-bacs, some of which are first-generation college students from underrepresented populations who don't know what it takes to get into graduate school. I try to pay back the lessons that started right here at the Academy, to push those kids, to try to learn the experiment or the technique that seems just a little too complex for them, to apply to the school that seems just a little bit out of their reach, to attend the conference in some place that they've never been before, maybe even outside New Mexico. They're really, really up for a risk. To reach for something that they may not have been able to reach for. So I'm incredibly honored to have this award today, but I'm really appreciative of the lessons that I learned from Dr. March and others here at the Academy that let me succeed today. So for both of those things, thank you very much.
You, the current students of Harrisburg Academy, will always have a special bond with one another and with each of the graduates who is receiving an award today, even though they are a few years older than you are. The bond that you share with the students is the same experience of being at Harrisburg Academy. Our next speaker and I have a special bond as well. We have both been the heads of school of Harrisburg Academy. Mr. Ralph Gillette was the headmaster of the Academy from 1978 to 1986. He was the headmaster when each of the next 3 Alumni Award recipients were Academy students. You may be wondering if Mr. Gillette is the grandfather of Alex, one of your fellow students. Well, he is. Headmaster Gillette will now present the 2014 Service to Humanity Award to Ms. Kristyn Leftridge, class of 1983. Ralph, please come forward.
Good morning. Kristyn Leftridge, class of 1983. Kristyn, it is no surprise to me that you are back here 30 years later to receive a high award at the Academy. No surprise because, as I remember, you always rose a little bit above your peers. In fact, in my memory's eye, I can still see you strolling the Academy halls in your regal, self-assured manner. Oh, you were not apart from your peers. In fact, you were very much accepted by them. In fact, were even a cheerleader. But somehow, you always communicated that something mattered more to you than the next basketball game. And that something, it was evident, came from a deep sense of values, which guided and directed your life. You learned those, I believe, at home. We may have nurtured them a bit, but you had them before you came to us. Those values, as is always true of values, were lasting, and they have led you into your amazing life of service in the Peace Corps and in midwifery. You have much to show to us that arises from values. In fact, Kristyn, I consider you a forerunner. Today, thanks to the strong leadership of Dr. Newman and his staff, character education is in the forefront of the Harrisburg Academy. Well, in our day, Kristyn, we didn't talk about it so much, but it didn't matter. In fact, when it comes to talking, I don't remember you talking much at all. But nonetheless, you were a force, a real force, because you were a person of action, a doer, someone who stood like a pillar in the student body as an exhibit of character and values. And as your headmaster, I deeply appreciated that. There is an old adage which says, the good just keep getting better. And Kristyn, you're the living truth of that. Your life of service is admirable. What you have done in the Peace Corps and in your midwifery work is to be applauded. You have achieved, but even more, we anticipate what you will yet achieve, because we know you are still getting better, and you began as the best. My congratulations, Kristyn.
Morning. Thank you, Mr. Gillette, Dr. Newman, Michael, current students, my alumni friends. Hey, John. I did not actually prepare anything because, as Mr. Gillette said, I am a person of relatively few words. I am fairly quiet. But I have to say that it is quite true that I was raised in a family where service was always very important. My brother is here to support me, and we have two sisters as well, and all four of us have chosen careers of service to other people, and our parents made very, very sure to impart to us that despite how fortunate we were, not everybody was that same way. So they made certain that as we went out into the world, that we remembered that other people didn't have what we had, and that we should always be certain to share our good fortune, our knowledge, our education, our experience with those who maybe didn't have that same kind of exposure. I started here when I was 5. I am one of the few members, I think, of the 13-year club. I think I turned 5 on my first day in kindergarten. And I graduated from here in '83. Kathy Widmer, Kathy, where are you? Kathy Widmer was my first grade teacher and my third grade teacher, and Mrs. Widmer is here today, and that just, I think, speaks to how incredible this family is. And as much as I was raised by my parents and my family at home, I was equally raised by this school. And I tell my children now, who don't have a school anywhere near, this sort of place, this kind of family, I tell them how fortunate I was to grow up in an environment where service was important, character was very important, and what you did in the school was also what you put out into the world, and that lesson was part of every single day here. So to current students, I would definitely encourage you to consider your impact on the world around you, even though I know that at your age, because I was at age 2, your world is kind of here because that's where you are. You're so focused on your friends and parties and games and school and college because that's what your world has to be right now. But remember that every action you do, every course you take ripples out and will impact other people. So every single thing that you do will have an impact on somebody else out in the world, whether it's your tiny little world or the larger world around you. So consider the broader impact of all of your actions and all the choices that you make as you go forward, because they will in turn reflect on you and what your life becomes. And I owe my understanding of that in very, very large part to Harrisburg Academy. So thank you so much for honoring me. I have to say that my friend Elizabeth Ween, who was class of '82, was my nominator. And when it became clear that I was going to be the recipient of this award, she said, well, it's about bloody time. So for that, I thank you very much.
Dr. March, will you return and to present the 2014 Academic Achievement Award to Dr. Peter Abt.
Students, do you remember what I said before about Walt Whitman? I'm not so sure, so let me read the quotation again. I want you to remember this, all of you. You've gotten great advice from our graduates and winners today. That the wise teacher wants the students to surpass him or her. And again, Dr. Abt, along with Jonathan Brigman, has certainly done that. I met Peter and his wonderful family and his twin sisters, Eileen and Susie, when I first arrived at the Academy in 1983. And no, the Academy did not cause all the silver hair. All three of the Abt children had very successful careers at the Academy and were, I add with pleasure, commendable AP English students. Peter attended Brandeis University, from which he graduated magna cum laude in 1990, and from which he was awarded the Steinberg Award, the first of many. Graduated from Dartmouth Medical School in 1994, and there again, he got the Hitchcock Research Award. He did postdoctoral work at the University of Rochester, from which he received the Arthur Natelove Surgical Scholar Award, and where he became a resident in general surgery. 2008, he was invited to join the Division of Transplantation in the Department of Surgery at the University of Pennsylvania as an attending surgeon. And he had been a fellow in solid organ transplantation surgery at the university in 2001. Peter has served as an ad hoc reviewer of articles in over 14 distinguished journals. He has been invited to give 19 lectures, has written or co-authored 79 articles for numerous medical publications. In addition, he has been recognized by the Association of Academic Surgery for the best manuscript by a new member in 2008, for writing top 10 abstract in 2010, and he has also served as a mentor to younger surgeons, and I'm merely glossing the surface of his achievements. Students, from all of our graduates, you can hear how senior speeches, formal research, writing, collaboration, and rigorous studying are excellent preparations for such careers. I am proud to introduce Dr. Peter Abt.
Good morning. It's a real honor to be invited back to the Academy and receive this award. I'd like to thank Dr. Newman and Mike LaRue for making this possible. I left the Academy in 1986, over 28 years ago, and I haven't been back till this day. So standing up here brings back a swarm of memories, many of them fond and warm. I asked Michael, he said I had about 7 or 8 minutes to say a few things, and I asked Michael, what should I talk about? He said, well, why don't you tell the students what you do for a living, how you got there, and how the Academy impacted what you do in life. So I'm going to follow, Mike, I'm going to follow your direction and stick to the script. So I'm a transplant surgeon. I work at the University of Pennsylvania as well as the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. For those of you who don't know, transplantation has a long history, but never achieved success until really the late 1980s when we figured out some ways to mute the immune system so that we could transplant foreign tissue into humans. And so what I do is I transplant children and adults who have end organ failure, primarily kidney disease and liver disease, with organs from either cadaver donors or living donors. All of us, most of us have 2 kidneys, and and we can give up one of our kidneys to somebody else who's desperately in need. In addition, more recently, we've been doing living donor liver transplants. The liver has this remarkable ability to regenerate, and that's been known for a while. If the students here recall your mythology, the Greek god Prometheus, who's tried to steal fire from Zeus, was punished by being chained to a rock and having his liver eaten by an eagle every day until he was eventually freed. So we've known the liver can regenerate, and we are now capable of removing a part of a liver from a living human being and putting it into a recipient who's in desperate need of a transplant. And both the donor liver as well as the recipient's liver will regenerate to support their metabolic needs. But this is only part of what I do for a living. As part of what I do, I am involved with a group of individuals who want to advance the field, to discover new things, and to take better care of our patients. So that involves teaching, not necessarily as form as lectures, but I have a cadre of medical students who work with me, general surgery residents who I teach how to operate and take care of patients, and then fellows, individuals who are already trained physicians who wish to learn more about solid organ transplantation, who spend several years working with me and my colleagues. In addition to advance our field, I'm involved in research, and these are trials. They're often retrospective data analyses using various statistical models, and we also do some types of translational research. And the output of this is publications. I'm also a reviewer on several journals. And then finally, what else I do in life is I work in advocacy for our patients in the field of transplantation. So I have worked with the United Network for Organ Sharing, which is an organization which oversees transplantation in the United States, and we help to develop organ transplant policy and figuring out who can get an organ, how we allocate those organs based on need. And I'm also involved with the American Society of Transplant Surgeons on various scientific agendas, as well as policy and legislative agendas. For example, pushing for coverage of prescription drugs that are important for our patients that the government would not necessarily want to pay for. So that sort of sums up what I do for a living. So how did I get here? Well, I kind of always knew I wanted to be a doctor in the back of my mind. I come from a family where my father's a physician. And when I was finishing up in college and had been accepted to medical school, this was in the late 1980s, transplantation was just starting to make it into the headlines of the newspapers as a field that may be viable. There were some recent advances in immunosuppression. And coincidentally, I had a minor health problem and had gone to the local ENT doctor and went up to his office, and in the office he was there with his nurse and his secretary in the medical arts building. And I went up there and I got treated, and I thought, boy, this is boring. I am not going to enjoy my career if this happens. So this was a turning point after being in college, where I had been challenged with various interesting fields in the humanities, in history, and in structural and molecular biology, that I figured out that I needed to do something else besides see patients. I needed to do something academic. So I went through medical school, and then in residency at the University of Rochester, we had a nascent transplant program. Transplantation had just started to blossom and had left, there had only been a handful of programs in the United States and had started to spread, and transplant had arrived in Rochester. And I had the opportunity to take care of patients who are incredibly ill, who were going to die, that when they received a transplant, and if they survived, would go on to work, to have families, and lead full lives. And it was just a wonderful feeling. The challenges at that time were incredible. The knowledge of the immune system was was in evolution, and this was important for figuring out how we would immunosuppress people. the technical issues and the care of the patients were challenging. Many of these patients developed opportunistic infections, and we had to figure out how to treat them. And there were numerous ethical issues in those days. Organ allocation, that is figuring out who would receive an organ, was not so clear. So there was potential for a lot of gaming of system, and some individuals certainly were disadvantaged. So I saw that this field offered a wonderful opportunity to help people, to build a career, and to bring meaning to my own life. So I went to Philadelphia and I pursued a 3-year transplant fellowship there, and then I eventually went on to the University of Rochester and then the University of Pennsylvania as faculty. So how did the Academy play a role in this? Well, the Academy offers many important attributes. In my case, it was a small environment where there was a lot of individual attention, which was not necessarily true in the public school that I attended. I had been in a large public medical school, and eventually my parents transitioned me over here, seeing that I was not, was floundering to some extent. And the Academy offers a fair amount of flexibility. So for individuals who have some specific interests, there's the time and the attention to develop those. When we were here, several of my friends wanted to start a cross-country team, and that was supported. We had a cross-country team. It was small. We weren't very good, but it was a team nonetheless. There was not a science fair when I was